Baron Shilard Fitz-Oesterlen was an envoy and ambassador from the Nilfgaardian Empire. He was incredibly proud of his knowledge of the Latin language and never missed a chance to show it off, which is likely why many foreign dignitaries despised holding a conversation with the man. Dijkstra was one such dignitary. The Redanian spymaster was never happy to see him because Shilard liked to lard his sentences with pompous linguistic oddities, comprehensible only to diplomats and scholars. Unfortunately, one day, Dijkstra had to summon the ambassador to his chambers in order to throw him out of the country. Dijkstra had figured out exactly who had betrayed his country to Nilfgaard, and somehow all these traitors led back to Shilard as well. Shilard knew perfectly well that their network had been exposed, of course. He knew equally well that every thread in that network led directly to himself. However, as an ambassador, he was protected by the global rules of immunity and protocol. He couldn't simply be put on the scaffold. So, Dijkstra and Shilard had to go through their whole song and dance revolving around diplomacy until he was officially and truly tossed out of Redania, back to Nilfgaard. During their little pre-exit back and forth, Dijkstra would bring up various problems he'd run into, such as Nilfgaardian blockades and the like. Shilard's job was to say, "We didn't know," or "You're just insinuating things," a whole lot, until Dijkstra gave up. Through it all, he kept insisting that the fake Ciri currently residing in Nilfgaard was definitely real and she merely sought asylum in the Empire. After Dijkstra's turn was over, Shilard would fire back with questions about Cahir, a Nilfgaardian noble knight who had been branded a traitor to the Empire. Now it was Dijkstra's turn to answer with a whole lot of "we didn't knowing." Finally, after a whole lot of fake smiling and equally fake looks of concern, the two parted ways. Shilard no doubt wiping the sweat off his brow. The two spies, diplomats, would meet again during the deliberations surrounding the peace of Sintra after the war, of course. Shilard was there on behalf of Nilfgaard to again tell everyone that they didn't know a thing about all the bad things happening in the world. He also would not stop butting in with Latin phrases whenever he was not asked a thing, causing a great deal of gnashing of teeth and rolled eyes. "I request," Shilard Fitz-Oesterlen said, without being asked, "for it to be minuted ad futuram rei memoriam that the Empire of Nilfgaard had nothing to do with that annexation." Apart from the fact that it was pillaging Vengerberg at the time. Nihil ad rem! Indeed. Unfortunately for Shilard, he was eventually ordered by his superiors to just make every possible concession when it came to making peace, and it was his job to make it sound like these decisions were made after grave negotiations. The superiors passing these orders hailed from the Merchants' Guild of Nilfgaard, likely the most influential group of people in the entire empire. A group Shilard would like to belong to. And so, in an effort to earn the goodwill of the group, he returned to the negotiation table to quickly establish peace. In the end, his efforts did in fact allow him to join the Merchants' Guild, of which he is a part when we meet him again in The Witcher 2, where he goes around trying to find out more about the Lodge of Sorceresses. He does this purely to ensure there is a reasonable scapegoat to pin the murder of several northern kings on. Murders requested by Nilfgaard, of course, to weaken the northern realms. Shilard personally kills Asiravar Anahid as she was outed as a member of the Lodge, and as such a traitor to Nilfgaard. He stands a chance to survive the events of The Witcher 2 if Geralt doesn't leave to save Triss. But if Geralt does decide to save said princess, Shilard is struck down by his own people because he's in the way. If he survives, the Emperor may not be very pleased with him either way, however, as from a letter we find later in the game, we can conclude that the Emperor has decided that Shilard has failed. In The Witcher 3, we find Letho hounded by the Emperor's dogs for failing his task as well, so we might surmise that Shilard is in much the same boat, unless the Merchants' Guild bails him out. Fortunately for the Fitz-Oesterlens, the family line wouldn't end with Shilard regardless, as he does have a son who is also terrible at any military school-related tasks. He likely only managed to get into the school because the Fitz-Oesterlen family was one of the wealthiest, most prominent, and most influential of the empire in the first place. His teachers would frequently reprimand him, especially for his lack of knowledge on historical battles like the Battle of Brenna, noting that there was very little chance of the boy ever making it as a commanding officer. But as he was a baron, he could simply go into politics or diplomacy, like his father had as well. Because we all know how well that ended. I'm sure you're not surprised, but we're not doing skits at the end cards today either. I am so sorry. My Patreons are getting titles today. I hope you appreciate those too. Walguy the Illustrious, Robertson the Enlightened, Lochmoine the Fierce, MJ Coolsta the Impressive, Septic the Catist, Mike Zweers the Unrelenting, Adrian Peckle the Impeccable, Ray the Fortuitous, Freeman the Wise,